Hello, today we're going to look at the main body of the NR83A Hitachi framing nailer. We're going to troubleshoot some of the leaking problems or lack of drive from this tool. So the first thing we want to do is make sure our tool is unplugged, and we never want to work on a tool that's plugged into your air. To look at the main body, we need to remove these 4 screws from the cap of the tool. So I'll remove these 4 screws. Once you have the cap removed, there's a few things you want to look at first. One is you want to look at this ring on your exhaust seal. If there's debris or a rock in there, that could keep the cylinder open so air is flowing by that, leaking out the top of your cap. The other thing you want to look at is there's no cracks in this figure 8 as well. If this is cracked, you'll get leaks as well out the cap. The last thing you want to diagnose on this cap is the exhaust valve itself. If that dries out, that can crack, causing leaking there. Then we can remove the cylinder of the tool and check for driver blade and ripped O-rings. So we'll remove the gasket. You can use the screw that came out of the cap and screw it in here. Pulling it from the cylinder ring, your cylinder will come out with the driver blade. Set that back. You want to look at the O-rings on the cylinder rings that are torn or damaged. You want to look at this exhaust valve for the cylinder as well. So you want to make sure that if this is torn in half, the tool will act like it's trying to drive with lacking power, because it's not creating a seal, allowing that driver to suck back fully in the tool, giving you poor drive. So if this is ripped, you need to replace that. We want to pull the driver blade out, check and see obviously if it's broken or not, it needs to be replaced. We want to look and see if this O-ring is flattened or flattened on one side. If that is, it needs to be replaced. A good way to remove this O-rings is generally to pinch the O-ring. We want to check also if there's excessive wear inside your cylinder here. You'll see lines or large grooves down the cylinder if it's worn out. That as well will reduce your drive power. So you want a good clean new O-ring and a cylinder that doesn't have big grooves in it to maximize your drive on the Hitachi framing nailer. We also want to look at the bumper of the tool, so we'll remove this flange that just pulls straight out, and remove the spring for the cylinder and these rings. And we want to look at the bumper down in here, and we want to make sure of no cracks. If the tool's cracked, that bumper is going to break apart eventually, and you'll end up breaking your driver blade. And you also might get some leaking out the bottom if you have cracks in that bumper. So if you see any cracks or big chips out of the bumper in the bottom here, you do need to replace that. And that's replaced by removing the bottom bolts in your screw here, and you'll remove that bumper from the bottom of the tool. Okay, so we've looked at our bumper, made sure that's okay. We looked at our driver blade, that it's fully intact. We've checked O-rings around the tool, make sure they're not flattened. We checked the gasket, make sure it was complete. We've checked our seals on our cylinder, that's good. The exhaust valve's good. If you put the tool back together and then it leaks, you can remove this poppet piece by removing these 3 screws, but I wouldn't recommend that because rarely do you get a leak from this poppet piece in the Hitachi framing nailer. So I would, last resort, remove that and replace the gaskets there if you're still getting leaking out of the top of the cap of the tool. Okay, so now we're going to reassemble the tool. You're going to put your cylinder ring down in the bottom here. You're going to put your spring in. You're going to put your other ring for the spring in on top of that spring. So it's sitting there. So you want to put your cylinder flange in next. Push that down, line up your spring and your spring ring there. You want to put your cylinder in next with the driver blade. Put that on there. You want to leave that driver blade sticking out so it's easy to line up in the bottom of the hole of the tool here. Then we want to put on our cylinder ring, hold everything in place, snap that down. On your gasket, and then you want to make sure your figure 8, I call it, lines up in the proper hole. And the tool, and replace your 4 screws. Now that we've reassembled our tool, we want to plug it in and then test it for leaks. When you plug it in, you might get some blowout of the top of the cap here. Because the cylinder is floating within that tool, that cylinder might not be completely sealed against the cap. And to do that, make sure there's no nails in there, your tool's plugged in, you can tap the back of the cap and that'll seal that cylinder up against your cap, and you won't have any blow by then. If you have leaks after that, then there's we need to go back into the tool and check O-rings and other broken parts. Now I'd like to close out with a few safety tips. 1, never walk around with your tool with your finger on the trigger. It's a bump fire tool. If you have your finger on it and happen to bump it against it, the tool will fire. 2, never have your fingers or body parts in front of the tool. And 3, when using a framing nailer, you always want to be wearing your safety glasses. I want to thank you for watching my video, and please visit easyrepairparts.com for all your Hitachi part needs.